The Earthworld Empire had been enjoying a golden age since its founding, spearheaded by a charismatic emperor and supported by his loyal officials and soldiers. The entire continent of Varna was well aware of their splendor. The people of the empire were proud that they were a part of this glorious age and took it for granted that each successive day would shine brighter than the last. But this vision came crashing down all too easily. Following the emperor's death, Earthworld dissolved into complete and total mayhem, and the stormy clouds of uncertainty settled over their future. They depended on the civil officials to keep the empire from stumbling in the crisis, but the imperial court transformed into a den of thieves overnight, as all scrounged for more power. Losing their guiding sun, the officials revealed their true nature, unleashing their dark hunger for more power. Of course, there were those who wished to put a stop to this. Faish Blundell, who had returned home from the kingdom of Natra, was one of them. Sadly, much too spineless. Exiting a room in the imperial court, she let out a stifled sigh. Her aide rushed over to greet her from her post outside. "How did it go, Ambassador?" "They've placed me under house arrest for the time being." The recent incident with the king of Natra was her own doing. This was the day they'd dole out her punishment. "Thank goodness they were more lenient than expected. I'm sure your track record was a deciding factor." "It's safe to say it's because they don't want me meddling with their affairs anymore." The kingdom of Natra may have pulled one over on her, but it was a minor country all the same. There were countless more important things to be done here in the empire. Indeed, an untold number of things. Faish had plenty to do, of course. But she somehow couldn't let it go, just when the empire needs me most, and yet it was incredibly frustrating. Ugh. Her heart filled to the brim with self-hatred. "You mustn't, Ambassador. If you do something while under house arrest, they'll met out a harsher punishment." "I'm well aware of that. I intend to behave myself," she pledged. "But conducting research should be fine, right?" "Research on what, exactly?" "The Crown Prince of Natra." Her aide looked concerned. "Ambassador, I understand that you are bested, but you must move on," she urged. "I don't care about that. I'm neither angry nor upset with him." She was being honest. Sure, she'd have more peace of mind if she blamed everything on him, but she still held him in high regard. He'd held nothing back, and she accepted her defeat. The past was in the past. Next time she'd get him for sure. Based on intuition alone, he's likely to have made rapid progress. It may be only a matter of time before he bears his claws at the Empire. I simply wish to prepare our country to ensure we nip it in the bud. "You must be overthinking matters, but if you insist, Ambassador, I will gladly assist." Faish smiled. "I appreciate your help. First, let's research the time you spent studying in the Empire. I already know a decent amount, but we may uncover something new." "Understood. Well then, I'll arrange for a thorough inspection of the archives," the aide confirmed before running off to carry out Faish's orders. Faish peered out the window to look at the sky, connecting her to the west and the kingdom of Natra. "I wonder what that little prince is doing right about now." She chuckled as she strolled down the hallway, with thoughts of a worthy adversary weighing on her mind. It had been 2 months since the Imperial army left the kingdom of Natra. Wayne gazed down upon hundreds of his soldiers neatly lined up before him, operating as one living, breathing unit, precisely obeying the orders of their commanding officer. Each move was spirited. The mere sight of it was breathtaking. "What do you think, Your Highness?" "Excellent work," he praised, nodding to his vassal in satisfaction as he watched the scene from his hilltop pavilion. "I was worried we might wander off course after losing Imperial guidance, but you've done a great job polishing them up so far. I was right to entrust them to you, Racklam." "Thank you," belted out Racklam, respectfully bowing his head. Though the man was tall with a solid build, he wasn't the least bit intimidating. This was thanks to his unremarkable facial features, though one could perhaps consider his longer-than-average arms unique. He was one of the commanding officers of the Natra army, and hand-picked by Wayne himself. "Be that as it may, Your Highness, all I did was follow orders. I am not deserving of such high praise." "I know how hard it is to find vassals for this job," Wayne insisted. "The fact that it was done at all is thanks to you." But your Highness was the one who selected and assigned me to this esteemed post. My deeds are hardly worth a grain of sand, Rackham said, pushing back. Honestly, you never change, Wayne said with a sigh, causing his officer to bow his head even more deeply. Then a charming giggle interrupted their exchange. Tee-hee, you two are too funny. It was Wayne's younger sister, Felania. Sorry, Felania, are you bored? Not at all. It's interesting to watch the soldiers move with such grace, and I enjoy listening to your conversations. But Rackham, you really ought to receive his praise. I'm a bit jealous, to be honest. He hardly ever praises me. You heard her, Rackham. Wayne looked over at him with a wry smile. With a complicated expression, Rackham finally spoke up. I will carve your Highness's words into my heart. Seems you can't stand up against my little sister either. Good work, Felania. You deserve some praise for that. Oh no, if you praise me for this, I'm afraid I'll have to make Rackham act even more stubborn from now on, she teased. The siblings burst into laughter together. Even Rackham let out a small smile. By the way, Wayne, I haven't seen Nanim around recently. Is everything well? I had some business I could trust only Nanim with. After all, she'd been chosen at birth to serve Wayne, and had undergone special training for this role, making her incredibly capable of handling any job flawlessly. How rare. It may be for work, but I'm surprised you allowed her to leave your side, Felania admitted. That was the truth. On the whole, Nanim never left Wayne's side. It couldn't be helped. I couldn't trust this with anyone else. He'd been reluctant, of course. With her help, it felt as though he could soar over a mountain instead of walk it. When he thought about his mounting piles of work for the day, he couldn't help but groan a little in his mind. Well, he could theoretically get someone else to take care of it, but it'd actually be pretty difficult after all. Wayne was the only one who could substitute for the king, with his father appointing the majority of the vassals. Their allegiance lay with the king and nation, not Wayne. So far, Nanim and Rackham were the only ones who'd pledged their loyalty solely to him, and possessed enough talent to participate in high-level politics. Aside from assigning Rackham to carry out the drills, he had no one else to take care of important matters other than Nanim. Could this work concern the Empire by any chance? Felania asked. What makes you think that? I hear you've been buying lots of weapons from the Empire lately. Noted Wayne. Well, it wasn't as though he'd been trying to hide anything, but Felania had apparently caught wind of it. Perhaps this crisis had finally sparked an interest in politics, and a desire to help him out. I'm buying weapons, yes, but my mission for Nanim is a separate matter. Well, okay, it's not totally separate, but, continued Wayne as he petted his sister's head. An idea zapped into his mind. Say, Felania, do you know why I'm buying weapons from the Empire? It wouldn't hurt to make this a teaching moment. She'd shown interest in the matter after all. She apparently understood why he was asking her this, as she thought carefully before answering him. Because the Empire's weapons are better in quality than Natra's? That's one part of the answer, but ours aren't particularly bad. It's just that military powerhouses are bound to have weapons of higher quality. Anything else? There's more. She frowned in concentration, but was at a loss for an answer, finally giving Wayne a perplexed look. The sight was so charming it brought a small smile to his lips. I can't go around telling everyone this, but the purchases are my way of apology to the Empire. Natra got more than its fair share in our transaction the other day. Really? But everyone's always praising you, Wayne. They say you took down the Imperial Ambassador a peg or two. She bragged as if she'd done it herself. He shook his head. In diplomacy, it's no good if something's one-sided, especially when you're negotiating with a nation more powerful than you. You want to avoid creating any unnecessary ill will. This is the second reason. She nodded, but then tilted her head questioningly. And the third reason. That's, started Wayne. Pardon me. A messenger came flying into the pavilion, yelling so loud that anyone present could hear. The kingdom of Marden is advancing on us. Felania's eyes flew open. They finally made their move. Raglan whispered to himself, and Wayne avowed in a voice of indifference, because we'll be needing to use them immediately. The kingdom of Marden was directly to the west of Natra. Though neighboring countries, their official relations were virtually non-existent, limited to mostly private interactions. This was because Natra's politics and ideology followed those of the East, even though it was in the center of the continent. This meant they didn't have stellar relations with Western countries. The two states were comparable in size, which was quite small. Their military strength was much the same, or rather used to be. That was no longer the case. The scales had tilted in favor of Marden ever since it had discovered a gold mine, leading it to emerge as a major power over the course of a few short years. On top of that, the mine was infuriatingly close to Natra's borders. Wayne couldn't stand it. Oh, how he'd internally screamed and cursed at it. Damn it! He'd seriously considered invading Marden once before, but in the end the idea had fizzled away into nothing. Now Marden was trying to invade them. It had been decades since Natra had last gone to war with another country. In fact, there were quite a few soldiers without any experience outside of drills and keeping order within the nation. Under the circumstances, it was natural for anyone involved to be ready to pack their bags and run for the hills. But that wasn't the case. As they gathered in a room at the royal court, Wayne and his military commanders showed no signs of backing down. Just as you predicted, we are impressed by your foresight, Your Highness. They kept calm for one reason. Wayne had already foreseen that Marden would invade in the near future, and took proactive measures with his commanding officers. It wasn't so difficult. He wasn't feigning modesty. It was the truth. The current king of Marden had a truly poor reputation. The rumors of his violent reign of terror had even reached ears in Natra. This king had apparently surrounded himself with corrupt officials who turned a blind eye to his failures as a ruler. And then he kept banishing any who dared to speak out against him. His behavior was setting the stage for a vicious cycle that would drive the country to ruin. With everything that had happened, even the gold mine was relegated to paying off major financial losses, instead of contributing to the country's well-being. With fond memories of their previous, more competent ruler in their hearts, the people were full of dissatisfaction and disappointment. Considering Marden's current state, the current conditions in Natra must have seemed like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The Imperial Army was no longer a nuisance now that they had gone home after their nation had fallen from power. This was the best chance Marden had to bring home a straightforward win. Everyone understood the appeal of glory and the spoils of war. Of course, this was all under the assumption they'd win, but Natra had prepared extensively to prevent that from happening. What about the garrisons at the border? They're avoiding battle and focusing on observing the enemy as you've instructed. Very good. Well, what are we facing? According to reports, they're coming with a force of 7,000, one of Wayne's commanders commented. Less than 10,000, eh? That was my most conservative estimate. They must be wary of Cavallino. That country is home to a hot-blooded bunch, after all. The kingdom of Cavallino was another country that directly bordered Marden. Like Natra, it also enviously eyed Marden's rich ore deposits. Thanks to the constant threat of foreign invasion by its neighbors, Marden had to strike a delicate balance between offensive and defensive forces. This was a perennial issue among warring nations. We have 6,000 soldiers prepared to engage the enemy. It seems we've fallen slightly short, said another commander. We'll be fine. Our weaponry and armor in order, I take it? Yes. As expected, the Empire's equipment is all finely crafted. Marden stands no chance. Because they'd anticipated this attack, the War Council was doing nothing more than hammering out details and making small, last-minute decisions. Wayne let his mind drift elsewhere as he listened to them chatter among themselves. We're well prepared. Luckily, we'll be able to wrap this up before the Empire causes us additional headaches. Natra's fast track to subordination had been interrupted. As rumor had it, the imperial court was more preoccupied over which of the three imperial princes would inherit the throne. Apparently, the divisions had worsened to the point that the various imperial factions were on the brink of a civil war. But Wayne still recognized the Empire as a powerful nation. The foundation of the Empire hadn't been broken, and he was certain they would overcome this hardship, maintaining their position as the leading power in the East. It was only a matter of time until he would have another chance to sell his country to the Empire. Until then, his job was to bolster power within Natra. After all, the more valuable his kingdom, the greater its price. In that sense, his actions would determine how much he'd be able to enjoy his early retirement. Our soldiers have been trained to the Empire's standards. This war is perfect for proving our strength and value. It will also keep other countries in check, though it comes down to whether we can win. Wayne and the others had drilled the soldiers, studied the geography, refined their strategy, and even collected intelligence on Marden's army. There wasn't the slightest chance of failure. At the very least, Wayne was confident the soldiers would be able to repel the attack, opening the option of a quick reconciliation. It was obvious the Kingdom of Marden was looking down on Natra, figuring this would be an easy victory. They wouldn't come calling like this just to steal a plot of barren land. It's perfect. His former deal with the Empire had resulted in a pileup of unfortunate coincidences that caused his last scheme to fall through. But that had been nothing but a stroke of bad luck. This time, Wayne predicted everything would go according to plan. He indulged himself with a jolly little victory dance in his mind. If Nanim were around, she'd have advised him to be more aware of his surroundings. If she did, he might have noticed something unexpected brewing under the composed faces of his commanders. To be frank, the kingdom of Natra's army was in a pitiful state before Wayne's ascension to the regency. It wasn't that the king disregarded his army, but for a long time Natra simply wasn't involved in any warfare, and chances for the military to prove its worth were few and far between. It was only natural that the military's standing in the royal court suffered during these times, and it only got worse when foreign troops sauntered into the kingdom acting as if they owned the place. The shame the kingdom's soldiers endured was intense. It was from this point that Wayne had turned things around for them. Not only had he persuaded the Empire to train them, but once an opportunity came, he also chased the imperial troops out of Natra lands. He even helped the army procure weapons from the Empire. Of course, they were well aware that Wayne's goal was to earn their goodwill, especially considering the kingdom's recent political unrest. Even with this knowledge, the soldiers and officers were grateful for everything he did, more so than he'd ever imagined, and their devotion was well beyond the call of duty. It was at this point that Marden launched its invasion. Let us fulfill our duty as the swords of Natra. If we cannot meet His Highness's expectations, then what sort of vassals are we, huh? Their collective energy had boiled over and finally reached its peak. Meanwhile, Wayne remained as composed as ever, because he believed victory was assured, even though it was his first battle. The commanders knew it would be impertinent to keep shouting and cheering in front of him, so they settled down and forced themselves to at least seem calm on the surface. No one showed their true emotion, which meant no one could have realized the massive gap in their expectations. Let us bring glory and victory to His Highness. Hurry up and get this over with. Retreat and reconcile. Their intentions were mismatched. The Battle of Marden loomed on the horizon.